Alright, pop the trunk. Show me what's so important.
Hey, what's poppin', players? I'm a Sega collector. I call myself that because I've been collecting Sega and Sonic the Hedgehog merchandise for almost my whole life. A lot of my hardware, software, and collectibles were passed down to me by family, and because of that, I have a lot of vintage and very rare Sega-related merchandise not many people know about. So it's my job to talk about it. From video game spotlights, to retrospectives, and of course, reviews on figures and plushes, you can find it all here. So enough talking, let's get the ball rolling. Welcome to the Sega Collector. The year is 1998, Sonic's got a new look, which means he needs new merchandise. Hi folks, how we doing today? It's your boy the Sega Collector doing what I do best, talking about classic and retro Sonic stuff that no one else bothers to. When there are redesigns of a character, it's a great time to make some merch. Why? Because it's kind of like a time capsule for that character. Oh, here's what Sonic looked like in the 2000s. Here's what he looked like in the 2010s. Here's what he looked like in the 2020s. It's always so fascinating to see. In the early 2000s, Sonic was low-key getting pretty popular again after a drought of Sonic content during the Saturn era. Like, look at this. One of the Saturn era Sonic games depicts him in an isolated, abandoned desert, much like Sonic's reputation at the time. With new designs came new merch. Now, I've talked about the Rosaurus and Toy Island toy line on this channel before, but never really gave much attention to plush maker Toy Network. These plushes were the Sonic items of my childhood, and despite how ugly some may look, I have a soft spot for them. The cool thing about Toy Network is they made quite a unique cast of characters that ranged in quality and size. You could have young stunners, medium chads, or of course, gargantuan icons. And today, we're covering it all. So sit back, grab a snack or your favorite plush, and enjoy as we spin dash into a Toy Network Sonic plush retrospective. Let's start with the blue dude himself, Sonic. And man, he kinda looks like garb. Now don't get me wrong, his colors and styles are all correct, but he just looks so weird. Let's first discuss the giant plastic eyes. Toy Factory had a tendency to place the wrong sized eyes for the wrong sized plushes. An eye that was meant for a 12-inch plush accidentally going on an 8-inch plush. Or an eye meant for a 12-inch plush accidentally being placed on a 4-foot plush. Jeez, he looks like a psychopath. Aside from his eyes, he has these flat little ears, a basically oval muzzle, a nub for a nose, and his spikes kind of look like a weird starfish. His arms are okay, I guess, but there's a stitching line going right down the middle of his stomach. And his legs are also very thick and not stuffed. His shoes are just spears and aren't pointed or anything and are filled with beads for whatever reason. Yeah, I don't know. There's not a lot of good going for this guy. But at the same time, the color choices are spot on, and I think it's really interesting what design elements Toy Factory considered super important to put on the plush. After all, for the US and Canada, this was the very first modern Sonic plush. Because of that, they relied heavily on stock art from the adventure games. The material they actually used for the plush is pretty soft, all things considered. Something that's gotta be said though is Toy Network has absolutely no quality control. Every single plush of Sonic or any character you got from them would not look like another. So while my Sonic does look a little weird, he certainly doesn't look like this. Moving on to Tails. Tails is okay, but notice how mine doesn't have a mouth. That's because I played with this one when I was a kid, and the mouth just kind of came off. Something to note is that the mouths were only stitched in 2 places, so it was really easy for them to become undone and just kind of fall off. Tails has his little tufts on his mouth and chest, big pointed ears, and more hair tufts on the top. Shockingly, he has the black glove and shoe belts that go around him, like in the adventure artwork. His actual tails, however, are just kinda like 2 long cylinders with pointed ends. This isn't very convincing. But his eyes look good and are bright blue, and honestly, their tails just isn't that bad. He's bizarre and off-model, but a lot of his proportions are pretty accurate. I actually have my very first Tails plush I ever got still in my collection. I got this one when I was about 7 years old. That makes this plush 18 years old! He's certainly one of my favorites in the entire line because he's probably the most decent. You know who isn't? Amy Rose. man, she is not looking good. I'm sorry, but like everything about her is just so wrong. First off, she is wearing some thick mascara. Next, her green pupils are ginormous and take up almost her whole eye area. Her ears are small and stubby, her spiked hair is not really well defined, and the rings around her wrists are just flat felt wrapped around. Her dress is poorly sewn, the little neck thing she has is just part of her skin, and the shape of her boots are just awful. This is truly one of the worst Amy plushes out there. And that's kind of odd because most of the time, Amy plushes look pretty good. Well, most of the time. I didn't even mention her flat face. Like, how do you make the face so flat? Aside from that though, her colors are all accurate, but like at what cost? Next, we're gonna move on to Knuckles, and I actually don't know. I think his body actually looks pretty accurate, and his weird Nike swoosh on his chest is also pretty accurate. His shoes, while all the details are printed on, do look correct, and his muzzle is actually pretty well done. It points outwards more than the other characters, just like in the artwork. His fists are big, but flat, and his spikes are just understuffed nubs. And his dreads are probably the most interesting part. So we know they're supposed to like go downwards, but for whatever reason, every plush of Knuckles Toy Factory ever made bunches them up in the back. He also has his fangs out, like much of the adventure art depicted him having back then, but his eyes are so far apart. Accurately purple, but he's like a fish who can probably only see one side at a time. As of right now, that about covers the initial first wave of plushes. The next couple are actually kind of hard to find, no doubt due to their obscurity. First, we've got Big the cat, and you know, he's actually not that bad. The back of his head is stuffed really well, and he has his long ears, the tiny mouth, his cheek tufts. He's got a big gut, and his gloves look good. The bell is actually made of a leather material, rather than felt, and he even has his fishing rod. Cool, but why? Why did Toy Factory go so hard for Big, of all characters? Don't get me wrong, he looks a little stupid, but like, look at his face. Is that not a face that you would love? Alright, you know how I feel about this. If I don't own the item, I don't like talking about it, but I do have to mention a few items Toy Factory made. They also made Dr. Eggman, who's actually called Dr. Robotnik on his tag. He looks a little weird. He's almost a pretty good plush, but his face is super weird looking. But then 2005 rolled around, and I think we all know what happened in 2005. With the success of Shadow, just even as a character, Toy Network had to introduce him into the line. And Shadow, buddy, you doing alright? Sadly, all of their Shadow plushes just look so bad. Wanna hear something really neat? All my Toy Network Shadow plushes come from my childhood. An 8-inch, a 10-inch, and a 20-inch. My first Shadow plush was the 10-inch, and he's not doing so hot. The 8-inch one I actually didn't get until after the 20-inch one. So, his face. Can we talk about the face, guys? I've been wanting to talk about the face all day. Ugly! Putrid! Humongous eyes, fat red spike stripe, yellow muzzle color, oddly positioned mouth. And look at him, he's so short and stubby. What makes Shadow cool is that he looks intimidating. This is not intimidating. You look at this man and you'll feel sorry for him. His fur is ironed on just like we saw in the last wave, and his glove and shoe cuffs are once again just flat printed material wrapped around. It's not a ring or anything. Pretty lazy. While his shoes aren't the right shape, they did actually get all the details on there. So many Shadow plushes actually forget to add those details to the bottom of his shoes. In 2005 or 2006, Toy Network also made these Sonic pillows. They only ever made Sonic, Knuckles, and Shadow, no doubt the most popular characters during that era. I got these for my 10th birthday, and I've never actually seen them for sale on eBay. Notice how it's all embroidered, very cool, and much more quality than the plushes themselves. Now, around 2006, Toy Network really began cutting corners. The contract for their production was slowly gonna come up and end, so I think they just wanted to make as much as they could for very cheap. At this point, all characters besides Eggman got re-released in this super cheap, super chintzy, awful quality material. It's kinda shiny for whatever reason. Some argue it's because it was for the 15th anniversary. But this just doesn't look good. It's also around this time that, to save money on production, Toy Network stopped using the plastic bead eyes and began ironing on the eye details instead. Honestly, this was probably for the better, so they could no longer get the wrong eyes glued to the wrong plush. But what really suffered the most in this redesign was the stuffing. These plushes looked awful. Every single one. These were seriously understuffed and always looked wilted and floppy. And I'm not exaggerating. Every plush looked like this. Quality control got worse and worse, culminating in some bizarre designs. At one point, for a brief time, they made a silver Sonic plush. Not the robot from Sonic 2 or Silver the Hedgehog, nope, just a silver Sonic. And ooh, we've seen some bad and some good in this video, but are you prepared for the worst? Like, the worst of the worst. The so incredibly awful it's offensive. The so awful you'd think these were bootlegs. Well, apparently, Toy Network felt the same because these next few plushes never came to the States. The last characters they ever made were Cream and Rouge. And man, I don't even know where to begin. Cream just looks like she got pancaked by a cement truck. And Rouge, guys, I don't even know what to say. This is like borderline not even Rouge. It's so awful, it's kind of its own character. And in 2007, Toy Network's contract with Sega had ended, as this was the last of their run of plushes. So what I didn't cover, simply because I don't own, are what this company is notorious for. Hot garbage. A website called Sonic Gear has a whole page dedicated to this stuff called the Calendar of Crud, and it is seriously worth looking at. Because these plushes were redemption prizes, they could be found at carnivals or in claw machine games. Toy Network pumped out some serious garbage so the plushes could be topical in regards to what time of year it was. Have you ever wanted a pirate Sonic for Halloween? A prison Tails for Halloween? How about St. Patrick's Day Amy? Oh, and obviously who could forget my personal favorite of all time, Knuckles himself, signing the Declaration of Independence with a fluffy pen for the 4th of July. My God. Actually, scratch that. I do own one. It's this godforsaken plush of Knuckles for Valentine's Day. Notice how the words are tattooed on his body. Wow, he must really be in love. That's dedication. There are literally hundreds of different variations of these characters, with some absolutely ridiculous additions and modifications, and unfortunately, they were seen a lot. So odds are there are a lot of people in this world who have these. I'm sorry, but one more time. Prison Tails? What did he do? Okay, I've got to get this over with. The implications are far too strong with this one. Now, as mentioned earlier, we did get these plushes in different sizes. I have an 18-inch Knuckles from their final run of plushes, a 20-inch Shadow stuffed with, like, styrofoam, not polyester. That's when their quality really dipped. And unironically, a jewel in my collection, this humongous 4-foot Sonic. A Sonic so large he took up my old bed before I moved out. You know, the story of how I got this plush is actually pretty funny. If you want to hear it, you should check out my Too Many Games video from 2019, because that's the video where I actually picked the thing up. I've been collecting for basically my whole life. I've got some incredible things. Things some people dream of owning. I've got Stringy Sonic. I've got a Soap Shoes plush. I've got 2 internal Sega discs that only employees were supposed to have, that have Sega presentation information on them for Tokyo Toy Show and Walk of Game. I have prototypes of figures and plushes no one else owns. I have all of Sega's mainstream home consoles. And yet, despite it all, the value and rarity of all of that, I think my favorite items in my collection have to be these fugly little Sonic plushes I've had since I was 7. I've got a plush worth literally thousands of dollars, but you can't put a dime on happiness. Hey, thanks so much for hanging out and watching another collecting video. Fun fact, when I'm not collecting, I make cartoons. I've made a few Sonic cartoons on this channel, and if you like stupid humor like that, then you've gotta check out another channel I'm part of called Gridlock Studios, home of this little guy named Czar, and a little children's show called Tucker. Just last year we hit 1,000 subscribers, but because animation takes time, we can't pump out videos quickly. So that's why you've gotta head to Gridlock to comment on our videos and subscribe so we can keep engagement high. It would mean the world to me if you gave Gridlock a chance. And I'm hoping to see some of you commenting on videos on that channel. Remember folks, collecting's my hobby, but making art is my life. I'll catch you on the flip.